So you want to replace fiat currencies?
Yes. Fiat currencies not backed by anything but trust in governments are a disaster waiting to happen. Tell me more about energy-based currency and trading in digital certificates.
Energy-based currency is like gold or silver-backed currency, only it is certificates that can be redeemed for units of energy, like kilowatt-hours of electricity or liters of gasoline.
How is that better than backed by gold or silver?
The supply of energy tends to grow with the economy. The cost of producing and distributing things tends to track the amount of energy that went into it. The cost of gold and silver as commodities reflects the costs of the energy that went into delivering them in that form.
So in some sense, aren't gold and silver-backed currencies already energy-backed?
You got it. The difference is that there are more forms energy can take, and forms that are of immediate use. Also, energy is easier to measure, verify purity, and divide into small amounts for small transactions.
I've been wondering how I could buy a pack of gum if all I had were gold coins. Wouldn't they have to be very small coins?
In 1789, a $10 gold eagle coin contained 247.5 grains of gold. A troy ounce is 480 grains. Today, a troy ounce of gold is trading at over 1,400 Federal Reserve notes, or about 2.92 Federal Reserve notes for a single grain, which is about the price for a gallon of gasoline.
What does a grain of gold look like?
Like a grain of sand or salt. Too small to be used for currency by itself.
So we would have to alloy it with a lot of something else, or maybe embedded in a piece of clear plastic to get a usably small amount for small purchases.
Right. Both gold and silver have now become too expensive for small purchases. They are now mainly useful only for large transactions, and not for ordinary currency.
How did it happen that gold and silver got too expensive?
The supply of gold and silver did not grow as fast as the world economy, which would have been deflationary if the world were on a gold or silver-backed standard. That would be bad for investors, who need the money supply to grow with the economy.
Would the supply of those metals have kept up if they were still used for currency?
Almost certainly not. We are not finding enough new high-grade ore deposits in either metal. The supply of each would be higher, but not nearly high enough not to be deflationary.
What would happen if world currencies were backed by units of oil and OPEC cut off production as they did in 1973?
That would be deflationary. Investors would be hurt.
I'm confused. You mean most prices would go down?
Measured in units of oil, yes. The average commodity could be purchased with a smaller amount of oil. However, it is likely that nations would create more fiat currency to offset that, and currency inflation would make the nominal price of oil about the same as it was before the embargo.
What would it take to make currency backed by energy?
For use in exclusively federal territory, or in dealings with foreign nations, it could be done by statute and perhaps some international agreements. The problem is within states.
What is the problem within states?
The U.S. Constitution forbids states from making anything but gold or silver legal tender for the payment of debts on their territories, so it would require a constitutional amendment to enable them to make units of energy, or anything else, legal tender.
But Federal Reserve notes are legal tender now. How did that happen?
By the Union government violating the Constitution, and the Supreme Court letting them get away with it. It goes back to the legal tender cases after the Civil War, when the Union wanted people to accept paper money backed by nothing in payment for its debts incurred in the war.
But didn't people still have gold and silver and want to use it?
Yes, and they did until 1933, when FDR got Congress to let him order everyone to turn in their gold to the Union government, giving them Federal Reserve notes in exchange.
And people went along with that. What were they thinking?
It was the Depression, and people trusted government more then. It claimed the Federal Reserve notes were still backed by gold, at $35 per ounce. But Nixon ended it in 1971, which also led the rest of the nations of the world to adopt fiat currencies, with theirs backed by the US dollar.
Couldn't we all just pass laws and treaties to adopt energy-backed currencies?
Yes, but it would still be unconstitutional on state territory, where Congress has no power to make anything legal tender.
You've got to be shitting me. No constitutional authority.
None. It can make something other than gold or silver legal tender outside a state, but not inside it.
Wow. So here in the state all these Federal Reserve notes
are not supposed to be used for money at all, and making people accept it for payment of debts is arguably criminal, except that no one is allowed to prosecute the crime.
Getting government to reform money seems to be an insurmountable undertaking. Is there anything people can do on their own?
Yes, some private mints have tried to issue silver and gold coins, and encourage people to start using them for money.
Can they do that?
Yes, as a matter of law. However, the feds have been trying to find excuses to prosecute them, and seize their gold and silver, without compensation.
How can they get away with that?
Don't expect justice from the courts. They are not willing to stand up for the Constitution against the other two branches and the powerful interests in the background.
Is there anything else we can do?
Yes, we, or at least those of us with computers and an internet connection, can use digital certificates to trade things.
How does that work?
It involves what is called public key encryption, whereby each person generates a pair of keys, one public that is disclosed to the world, and one private that is kept secret. People can use them to send secure messages to one another that only the recipient can read, and he can verify the sender.
That sounds complicated. I won't ask about the details for the moment. So how can one create and use certificates with them?
Using this technology, one can create a digital certificate and associate it uniquely to some asset, like an ounce of gold, that can be sent to someone else, in exchange for something, who can send it to someone else, in exchange for something, and so forth, until eventually some recipient presents the certificate back to the originator in exchange for the gold. Along the way, people can use it to exchange for all kinds of things, goods, and services.
So anyone can create his own money and issue it to the world.
Right. Every individual with at least a small computer can become a kind of bank. As long as everyone involved can be trusted, and there are ways to shut anyone out of the trading system, if they ever fail to redeem anything, then people can become independent of governments.
And they can create e-certificates for any kind of asset?
Yes. It doesn't have to be pieces of gold or silver. It could be anything from ammunition, to energy units, to hours of skilled labor. It could even be to Federal Reserve notes, but I don't know why anyone would want to do that.
So everyone could be his own bank. How would governments react to that?
They might have to start taxing us in something like units of energy, because it might be the only thing we all have in common.
Couldn't governments control the internet to stop such private banking?
It might be necessary to relieve ourselves of dependency on cable trunk lines. We could go to mesh networking, which would turn our smartphones into wireless internet nodes that can relay packets from one to another without anyone having to be connected to any kind of wire. A wireless internet of portable nodes.
Is anyone doing such digital certificates now?
Yes, a good example is at loom.cc, but there are soon likely to be many more.
How much time do we have left to use these things to avoid global catastrophe?
It is probably already too late to avoid disaster, but we need to get started to save what we can from the disaster. Never mind saving the ship. We are looking for lifeboats and life preservers now.